Hey guys, this is Mark. In this video, I will talk about the date time data type in Backendless Database. We'll demonstrate how to create a column of the data type and the data formats that it supports, and the kind of things that you can do to retrieve data using the data type. Although with data retrieval, there will be a separate set of videos where I will be talking about all kinds of things that you can do as far as querying the database, including data in the date time columns. Let's start with configuring a column. In fact, we already have one column with that data type. It is the date of birth. Let's take a look at how it is configured. Very straightforward. You provide the column name, and then in the type drop down you select date time. Once you select date time, what this does is it instructs the database that the data stored in that column will include information about date and time. So it will give a precise point of time when something happened. In this case, the date of birth. While we may not care about the time stamp of the actual date is also going to be in there. And I will demonstrate some examples in a second. Some other configuration parameters here, they're fairly standard default value. This can be provided and will be used. That value that you specify here will be used whenever you are saving a new object that does not have the date of birth property. So the default value will apply. The constraints are exactly the same as you have seen before in the video where I reviewed these constraints. I believe the one for the string and text data types. And validator is also, it's a regular expression validator where you can provide a custom regex for the format that needs to be accepted. There are some built-in ones that you could use for datetime. Let me see if there's actually one. Actually, there is not. So there is no pre-built validators, but you can come up with your own if you need to. While the validator, it may actually not be needed at all because the database itself expects the data to come in a certain format, and if the data you are saving does not conform to that format, then an error will occur. So this is the setup. Here we'll already have a couple of records with date time value in there, and I will demonstrate again in a second how to query the database with the syntax that we support. Now let's take a look at storing data with the date time information. So for this I will create a new request body, and let's say the name is going to be Jack, and the date of birth value we will specify in the following format. So here we will say it is January 1st of 2005. Notice that the actual value that I provide is in the string format, and that's what the database expects. A string format that is in the format of month, date, and year. So it needs to be in American formatting where the month comes first. You can actually include the time information as well. So for instance, if we say it is 18:00:00, which is 6 p.m., that will be saved. The question a question may come to mind is what time zone this time is going to be in. Whenever you provide specific information here as far as the date and time in this format, the database will assume that the time zone that is identified by this date and time information is UTC 0, which is the Greenwich Mean Time, and which is kind of the standard to normalize the date and time. There is some magic going on whenever you retrieve data from the database in any of our SDKs, for instance, or in UI Builder, with the data for the date time columns will be converted automatically to the client's time zone, and we'll take a look at it perhaps in a separate video. But for now, let's save this data. And notice that in the response for the date of birth property, we got a number. So this number is the number of milliseconds that have elapsed since January 1st, 1970. And there are tools online that you could use to actually convert this to a date time that would be easier to understand by humans. However, in any of the SDKs that you would use from Backendless as well as UI Builder, you do not need to do that conversion. It is done automatically. So for instance, if we were to convert this to a human readable format, if you Google milliseconds to date, and the very first link, it's the currentmillis.com. In here, you can just paste that value, and it will tell you exactly what the UTC human readable format of the date time for this milliseconds is, and that is January 1st, 2005, 6 p.m. Exactly what we specified in here. Let's take a look in Backendless console what that value is. If we go to data browser, and this is our record for Jack, notice that this value is exactly what was specified in the payload. There is a checkbox here that says dates in UTC. So whenever it is, and by default it is not checked, but here I have checked it and I see exactly what's stored in the database. If I uncheck this, then the actual timestamp will be converted to my current time zone, and I am in GMT -6. So here, the same date is now converted to noon in the U.S. Central Time Zone. So that's kind of the conversion as far as the time zone. There are some things that you can do as far as querying the database. And this is, by the way, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because there will be a separate video on querying, but I wanted to demonstrate this now anyway, since we are talking about datetime. So if you want to retrieve records, let's say where I want to get all the people that were born after 1999, for instance. In this case, what I can do is specify the name of the column, date of birth, and I can say greater than 01/01/1999. Click go, and the database runs the query and brings me back only the records where the date of birth is greater than 1999. You could also use, instead of the greater sign, you can use the word after, and it will work exactly the same way. So we got the same 3 records. Or you can put before, and we get the records where the timestamp for the date of birth is before January 1, 1999. Instead of before, you could actually use less than sign, and it will work exactly the same way. What you see here is a format of a query, and we call it where clause. And once again, there will be a series of videos where we talk about where clause and different formats, but this is something that I wanted to point out that that is supported by Backendless. Whatever you put in here, whenever you have SQL search enabled, these queries could actually be used in the applications that you will be developing. So whatever is supported by Backendless from the application perspective is supported in here as well in this search bar. Another thing that I wanted to point out is in the payload, whenever you send data to Backendless, instead of the string, you could actually use timestamps. So for instance, if we take the same value for date of birth and we put it in here, and save another person, for instance, Lily, and click put. So this record was saved, and again, this value was accepted. So whenever you are saving data for a date time column, you have the choice of either providing number of milliseconds or a string that designates both date and time, and then both will be processed by Backendless in exactly the same way. And going back now to data browser, the search is cleared. So now we have Lily that has exactly the same timestamp as Jack that we have saved earlier. So here, this is the timestamp in my local time zone, and then in UTC it's going to be 1800. So fairly straightforward. There are a lot of operations that are supported as far as processing the date time values in the database, extracting certain portion of that date time, either getting the month, year, day of the week number, and so on. So there are a lot of operators. We'll definitely be looking into that in the series of videos in this course where we talk about data retrieval. But for now, that's all I have prepared. Thank you for watching this video, and as always, happy coding.